If we turn exams to being done on computers, the skill of writing will be lost completely.
Not necessarily. So I was listening to you just now, Nigel, we're talking about taxis.
Yeah.
And you said the world's changing.
Yeah.
You use a sat-nav. You were complaining that your sat-nav doesn't work as well as it should do down by your village.
Yeah.
People used to say, you've got to use maps. Now, there's a certain skill in map reading that's lost when you've got a sat-nav.
Which actually leaves us poorer for the experience.
Yeah. I've just been sitting in your green room. I counted the number of computer screens and laptops. There's loads of them in there.
What I'm saying is that the actual basic human skill of being able to write is still quite important, despite the fact we do less of it.
The skill of being able to write is important. Now, in actual fact, if you read what Ofqual have said, Ofqual are the board that kind of pushes ahead in terms of exams, they say over the next 3 years, what we should do is think about the use of digital technology in terms of exams. So it's not about abandoning everything and move it from over here to over there, but it's about incorporating these things. In the pandemic, there's an interesting thing. In the pandemic, because we do have so many schools, we've got 32,000 students, the pandemic taught us that home education is important, but some kids are advantaged and some kids are disadvantaged. So what we did...
And that depends on their home circumstances as much as anything else.
Exactly. So what we did is we bought 35,000 iPads. In fact, Apple said to us it was the biggest purchase of iPads ever. But what it means is that every child can learn at home in exactly the same way. But what we discovered was this. They begin learning different things. They begin experimenting, exploring. You could argue that exams in that drafty old hall are just a memory test. You come in and it's short-term memory, and the better you are at writing in short-term memory, the better you do. What if you could bring a digital device in and use it to explore and to analyse? One of the things that employers around here say, as I'm sure you'll know, is that we produce people from schools who aren't able to think. They're not as creative as they should be. They're not as business ready as they should be.
It's very difficult to measure those things, isn't it? Which is why I'm so fascinated by this new concept of adaptive testing. Explain all, please.
Adaptive testing simply, well, here's something you should know to start. Perhaps you do. A third of kids every year, for years and years, since you were young and since I was young, have left school feeling that they're absolute failures. And that's a real problem that we have as a nation. They call it the forgotten third. The kids who are only taught by school, I'm thick. But adaptive learning, which you can use digitally, if you answer a question right, and putting it very simply, it asks you a harder question and a harder question. But if you miss one, it drops down a level. So it's actually more accurately testing your ability and your knowledge than a paper that you sit in front of and you can't do anything about.
But how does an employer look at this? How does an employer measure this? It's all very complicated, isn't it?
It's not very complicated.
Well, Sounds it.
Yeah, but you're not a digital native, are you, Nigel?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. And I get that. I get that. I do get that. But the idea, I mean, look, let's just sort of recap on education. You know, handwriting as a skill is still necessary.
Absolutely.
Fine, good. Otherwise, you know, this approach of doing everything on computer.
But it's not all or nothing, is it?
Well, I hope not. That's one of the reasons I've got you here to talk about it.
So I came in and I sat in your green room with my iPad, and someone said, "Oh, you brought an iPad. Is that to prove a point?" It's not. It's because I work on an iPad. But I also picked up a pen and did some scribbling.
And classroom skills. And classroom learning matters.
Classroom learning matters, but our idea of learning, you'll find that probably even the headmaster, I think you went to Dulwich College,
I did.
You'll probably find that even the headmaster of Dulwich College, I might be taking his name in vain, but I certainly know the headmaster of Harrow and Eton and Lord Baker, who introduced GCSEs, all say together, a view that I totally agree with, that the problem with GCSEs and A-levels is they're too narrow, they're too rigid. What we need is a wider way of testing a young person's intelligence.
And a final thought on all of this. The forgotten third. They might be really good, at trades and skills. They shouldn't be leaving school feeling like failures. They should be leaving school having been directed towards things they might be good at. And we're not doing that.
No, exactly. So we've got to measure what's in your head, how you use your hands, and what's in your heart. Yeah. You can leave school now in our society being very good at short-term memory. You can remember the classics, etc., etc.
Yep.
You can do very well. But who's testing your character, your integrity, your ability to tell the truth?
And they're subjective things that are tough to measure.
And introducing digital technology into learning broadens things out. So you talked about kids that are going to leave school and work with their hands and be engineers, etc.
And earn lots of money.
And they need digital skills to do it, Nigel.
Oh, no, they need some, of course they do.
When you get a guy to refit your kitchen, you hope he brings his iPad.
But they don't need 9 GCSEs, is the point I'm making.